Production of new Digimon virtual pets would be placed on hold for a while, so that Bandai could focus on selling Digivices to coincide with the show instead. When Digimon Frontier came out, it received a Digivice toy, just like the seasons before it, called the D-Scanner. This time, however, the Digivice would not be alone, as in July 2002, the Digimon Pendulum Progress was released. As its name implies, the Pendulum Progress features the same shaking mechanic found in the Digimon Pendulum, and the shell even looks similar, though with a more angular design and larger, more stylized frame. The buttons too have been changed from circles to parallelograms. The size of the device is smaller than you may expect, as it's only slightly larger than the Digimon Pendulum. The screen, however, has been changed to feature the same size screen used on the Digivices, which also means that the border icons have been removed, and they will be sorely missed. You may wonder why I like the icons more than the full screen menu, and well, it's honestly not a huge deal, but I just find it easier to get right where I want to go. With the icons, you always know what the next option will be, but with the full screen menu, you have to memorize it if you want to quickly tap to the desired menu, or go slowly enough to not accidentally pass it. Although maybe that's just my problem, I don't know. The screen would also turn off if you weren't actively using the device to save battery, but your Digimon would still age like normal. So those are the visual changes. What's different for gameplay? Starting with the stats screen, we have age and weight as usual, as well as status to display whether your Digimon is sick or not. Below that, the name of your Digimon will scroll by, which appears on every page of the stats menu. We then see hunger and strength, depicted by 4 hearts as usual, but we also see a number. Digimon in the Pendulum Progress can have more than 4 capacity for hunger and strength, with the currently filled amount out of maximum capacity for your current Digimon written as a fraction. Now is also a good time to show off that you can scroll backwards and forwards in the stat menu by pressing either A or B, so you don't need to wrap all the way back around to check something you passed. DP returns in exactly the same way it was used on the Pendulum, and then we have something very unique to the Progress, your battle capabilities. Each Digimon has its own minimum and maximum values for HP, attack power, and speed. HP is how many hits your Digimon can take before it loses. Attack power is how much damage each hit deals to your opponent, and speed is how likely you are to dodge an incoming attack. This is one of my favorite things about the Pendulum Progress, especially because the stats are plainly written, so you would always know how you would likely fare against opponents. By training, you would be able to increase these stats to a certain cap based on your Digimon. Different Digimon also have different strengths and weaknesses. This Airdramon, for example, specializes in speed, and is the fastest adult on this version. It has a pretty average attack power, but its HP is lower than the other adults. If you lose battles, the stats will decrease, so it's important to train again to get them back up. The next screen gives us our attribute and ability to battle or joggers, and now the evolutionary stage is also displayed. The last screen shows us our battle record like usual, which is factored in for evolution. Feeding, cleaning poop, lights, and healing Digimon all work exactly like they do on the Digimon Pendulum, so I won't get into any of that. Training also works the same way, but you'll notice that the training menu has another option, Battle. For the first time ever, you could battle against Digimon to fulfill evolution requirements without requiring another device, which was a very welcome addition. The first implementation of the Coliseum was very basic, and involved you fighting the same 3 Digimon over and over. You start off by fighting 3 adult Digimon in a row, followed by a perfect Digimon. This pattern would continue until the 100th battle, where you would fight an ultimate Digimon. On my device, the opponents are Greymon, Metal Greymon, and War Greymon. Some Digimon on the Progress require an absurd number of battles to obtain, over 150 in some cases, so having Digimon to battle on the device is vital. There's also a couple of odd things about the Coliseum compared to connection battles. First, it only takes 1 DP to initiate a battle, and you can keep battling on that 1 DP until you lose. Second, losses in the Coliseum are not counted on your battle record, so if you only do Coliseum battles, your win ratio will always be 100%. As before, you determine what kind of shots your Digimon will fire in training and battle via shaking. There are now 4 levels of attack rather than 2, making for more varied battle results. Something very helpful is that you now see a readout of how many shakes you did, so you can know whether you need to change your count or not. The amount of time you had to shake was much higher than on the Pendulum, and that was to account for the fact that the number of shakes needed was greatly increased. The first Digimon Pendulum would require up to 24 shakes for a mega hit, but later versions never required more than 10. Compare that to the Pendulum Progress, where sometimes you would need to shake a minimum of over 60 times to get a Terra hit. The third version calmed down greatly, with 27 being the highest minimum shake, but in the first two versions, it could feel impossible to hit the right numbers. Shaking as hard as I can barely make it to 60 sometimes. Since the border icons were removed, one slight change is that calls would now be indicated by your Digimon doing an angry animation, and it would yell several times to indicate that it needed something. The response window was much smaller this time, as if you didn't respond within 3 minutes, you would receive a care mistake. The last gameplay piece we come to is connectivity, and we once again have the ability to battle or joggers. As usual, the Pendulum Progress has its own battle system that incorporates the unique stats it features, and it can also battle with the Digimon Pendulum using that device's battle system. One glaring omission though is the digital monster battle system, making the Pendulum Progress entirely incompatible with the original digital monster. It did have an option specifically for the D-Scanner though, to further cement its status as a companion VPET to that Digivice. This is further reflected in joggersing, where certain joggersing combinations could only occur via connecting to a D-Scanner of the same version. For example, if you had XVmon on the first Pendulum Progress, you could joggers it with a Stingmon on the first D-Scanner. You could also joggers with another Pendulum Progress, but there were not as many combinations as there were on the Digimon Pendulum. In total, there were 3 versions of the Pendulum Progress, each following a different theme similar to the Pendulum. Dragon's Roar for Dinosaur and Draconian Digimon, Armageddon Army for Holy and Evil Digimon, and Animal Coliseum for Digimon based on animals. Dragon's Roar would end up becoming one of the 8 major fields for Digimon, along with the 6 fields introduced in the Pendulum series. Sadly, we have never received a VPET for the 8th field, Jungle Troopers. The roster size in the Progress remained close to the same as the number on the Pendulum series, but with 3 additional Digimon on each version. Interestingly, these 3 Digimon were added in different ways for each device, with each getting at least 2 more Ultimates, and the third Digimon being an Ultimate, a Child, and a Super Ultimate for versions 1, 2, and 3 respectively. Interestingly, evolution was very open. As long as a Digimon didn't require a Jogress, any of the Digimon from the previous evolution stage could evolve into it. The key factor in determining how you would evolve was what time of day you trained. As long as you trained enough, you could have a Digimon that was aligned with night evolve into one aligned with morning. As for which Digimon were featured, the Progress deviated greatly from the previous series, as it didn't debut a lot of new Digimon. Instead, it focused largely on Digimon from the anime. Version 1 featured all 3 main protagonists from the first 3 seasons in V-Tamer, while version 2 featured the 3 Grey Angels and Lucemon from Frontier, and several other familiar faces. Version 3's roster was very interesting, as the child and adult forms represent a few protagonists from the anime and Digimon World 3, while the 4 Holy Beasts make up most of the Ultimates. But it was also peppered with an entirely new type of Digimon, those with X antibodies. The Pendulum X, which is the next device we will talk about, released about a month after the last version of the Digimon Pendulum Progress, but the X Digimon that premiered in the Progress all came from the card game in a booster that released a month prior. All in all, between showing off Digimon from the anime and games, there were only 6 Digimon that made their debut in the Progress: Chaosdramon, Ulforce Vidramon, Putimon, Cupimon, Witchmon, and Lilithmon. So that brings us to my thoughts. What do I think of the Pendulum Progress? The best thing about the device is definitely its improvements to the battle system. Being able to see your stats is fantastic, and I love how stats will vary between different Digimon. Training is something that's generally kept as an invisible stat, so being able to actually see those numbers is such a good change of pace. I wish more Digimon VPETs did that. It makes your evolution route matter that much more and gives you incentive to try paths you might not have tried otherwise. Having the shakes appear is also a major improvement, as it would really help you determine whether or not you were doing a good job of that. And even with the Coliseum being pretty bare bones, it was a very welcome addition. Unfortunately though, I don't really like just how much shaking is required. I'm not against shaking normally, but requiring over 60 shakes is just too much. The day-night evolution mechanic was also something that was interesting, but not something that really appeals to me, especially when it's still used in conjunction with several other evolution requirements. And speaking of evolution, I definitely like varying evolutions, but I also like some restrictions, so being able to evolve into absolutely anything with no variance in requirements was not very interesting to me. The only other thing is that for a device that requires so much battling for certain evolutions, it really needed a way to skip battle animations, or at least make battles shorter. When every battle is to the death, it can take a significant amount of time for it to complete, especially as HP gets higher and higher. The Pendulum Progress brought some interesting ideas to the table, but it goes below the Digital Monster series in my overall ranking. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try it out though. I know plenty of people who hold this as their favorite device, and it could end up being yours too, so definitely give it a shot if you can. The end of the Pendulum Progress line would also be the end of the anime for a while, and it would be several years before Digimon Savers would release. Why that is, I'm not sure, but with focus removed from the anime, that gave Bandai the chance to try adding a fresh coat to the franchise via the X antibody. And we'll be going over its flagship device on the next episode of A Brief History of Digimon V-Pets. If you're interested in seeing future episodes, please consider subscribing, and you can receive notifications of my uploads by hitting the bell icon. Until next time, bye!